The data points is where everything finally comes together. This is your triangulation of data at its finest. You're taking everything that you have on the student, all of your knowledge, all of your data, and you are putting it together into one final piece of the puzzle to where you're basically, it's not even the. So the data points basically consist of all of the different information that you have gathered from the different testing and other data that you have gathered. What you need to do is gather all of the information that you have for the student, including your DAR testing, your QRI testing, all of your pause and reflects, and of course any other classroom assessment data that you may have from your previous experience with the student. For prediction, what you're trying to do is figure out whether or not a reader is actually even making predictions. Are they thinking about what's going to happen next? You can look at not only the prediction tasks assigned by the QRI, but also any other interaction you've had with the student. You want to know whether or not they're actually taking the information from what they're reading, and are they applying it to a logical deduction of what's going to happen next. For fluency, you obviously want to take any of the words per minute data you have in combination with the multi-dimensional fluency chart that you provided. You want to look at all parts of a student's fluency, including whether or not they have prosody and also are they reading with a decent amount of speed. For sight vocabulary, you're really going to look at those QRI word lists and look at what they said automatically or what they just identified. Our thought process here is that if they are getting the words automatically, that is part of their sight word vocabulary. If they are simply identifying, they may be doing some sort of decoding, which will possibly affect their fluency. One of the ways that you can tell if a student is using context or not is through whether their replacement words, the words that they are putting in place of the text word, actually make sense in the sentence. You can look at things like the miscue analysis chart that lets you see whether or not they are staying with the same part of speech, and also looking at all of the replacements they are choosing to do, and is it doing meaning change miscues or are they simply miscues that still retain the meaning of what the author is trying to get across. For morphemic analysis, you're looking at those miscue analysis charts again. You're looking at those beginnings and the endings and seeing whether or not that they are using those in those miscue analysis charts. Are they recognizing those? Are they replacing words but keeping those in there even if they're saying the rest of the word wrong? For graphophonic analysis, you're going to again be looking at those miscue analysis charts. You're going to see if they're just looking maybe at the beginning letters of a word and saying any word that they know that begins with those, or same thing with the ending of the word. Do you see any patterns, and how are they pronouncing the letters in the words? Obviously, with prior knowledge, we know this is one of the biggest things that determines the comprehension of a text for a student. So you can look at not only those prior knowledge questions that they ask on the QRI, but you can also look at the way that the student is answering those content questions at the end of the QRI. For retelling, that is where you're going to use not only the retelling checklist at the end of each story that the students read in the QRI, but you're also going to use that retelling chart that you were required to have as part of your case study. For text type, you should have been providing passages to your student with narrative and expository text at different levels, and hopefully at least one of each at the same level. And this way you can compare the student's performance in those two types of texts. For explicit comprehension, you're going to be looking at those questions at the end of the QRI passages that you had the students answer. They are marked as explicit. They're those right there questions, and seeing how the students are answering those questions. You can also use lookbacks as to whether or not, if they did miss the question initially, were they able to look back in the text and quickly and easily find the answer. Right there questions, those explicit comprehension questions, should be relatively easy for students during look back. For the implicit comprehension questions, those are those ones where they have to really kind of infer, they have to look into the text, those author and me questions, and so those might be a little bit more difficult, and they might have a little bit more difficulty actually finding that in a look back. So for the implicit comprehension questions, you're looking to see, are they really able to answer those higher level question types? For lookbacks, you're trying to figure out whether or not the lookback actually helped the student when answering those questions. So if they missed a question in a comprehension questions, then when you gave them the opportunity to look back, were they able to then find the answer? Was it easier for them in different types of text, or were the different types of question, implicit or explicit, easier? One of the required documents you had to have for your case study was an interest inventory. So not only your interest inventory, but your interactions with the student can help you identify what the child's perception of reading was. Again, using the interest inventory in your personal interactions with the student, you can come up with some information as to what the student's attitude towards reading is. The student's general interest can help you guide them towards their independent reading material. So not only the interest inventory, but also any personal interactions you have with the student can help you to come up with what their general interests are. Many students who struggle with reading generally say that they don't like to read at all. So they may not be able to identify books that they want to read, but using your knowledge of their general interests, you can come up with what types of books that you think they might read, what their reaction to maybe in your classroom to any of the books or reading choices that you've had. And again, you can use information from the interest inventory and personal interactions with the student. Oftentimes, the student's self-concept of what kind of reader that they are can change how they approach reading in general. So based on, again, your interest inventory or your personal interactions with the student, how do you think they view themselves as a reader or a student in general? Do they consider themselves a good student, a good reader, or do they look down upon themselves for their performance in reading and general academics? this is a section where you'd put down anything that you believe impacts them as a reader and as a student in general. Things like any particular learning disabilities that they may face, any physical issues that they have to deal with, any other issues, whether it's maybe personal home life issues. Are they a student in transition? Have they been held back multiple times? Anything like that that you think might contribute to them as a student. In addition to the 18 different data points that you have to write up, you also have a final write-up that includes 5 greatest strengths, 5 greatest needs, and instructional recommendations. So what you have to do here is you have to come up with the 5 greatest strengths of this student. It can be something simple like their attitude or that they always show up with a pencil, but you need to have 5 things that they are good at, that are their strengths, their strong points. Then you need to come up with their 5 greatest needs of the student. 5 things that you would need to focus on as their instructor. 5 things that are the biggest need for them to work on. And then you need to have instructional recommendations for each strength and each need. So 5 instructional recommendations to coincide with each of the greatest strengths, and 5 instructional recommendations to coincide with each of the greatest needs. So you'll have 10 total instructional recommendations. The data points is where everything finally comes together. This is your triangulation of data at its finest.